Gold is a treasure, and he that possesses it does all that he wishes to in this world. These words give us a clear reality of the situation in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The possessors of its wealth have defied all law for decades.
While the Central African country boasts of mineral deposits estimated to be worth trillions of dollars, the wealth has fueled a never-ending war that has left millions dead, hundreds of thousands displaced, children and women facing grievous human rights abuses of unimaginable measures.
Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Africa Today. I am your presenter, Sheila Nelima.
And I'm Mubarak Kenya. In this program, we shall focus on Africa's most resource-rich country, the Democratic Republic of Congo, specifically highlighting on its war-based economy and how it has survived for over 20 years.
As usual, we shall have our weekly newscast and your comments on social media.
We shall also look into the world's youngest nation, the South Sudan, another war-torn region.
Could it be blamed on ethnic disagreements as so much suggested, or who are the enablers?
So stay tuned to find out.
Democratic Republic of Congo's war-based economy. Congo's natural wealth, estimated at 24 trillion US dollars, is mainly found in the eastern part of the country, which has been a combat zone for over 20 years. With over 25 international mining firms excavating its mineral deposits, one may think that the Congolese people are reaping benefits from the wealth of their land. This cannot be further from the truth.
This is the Democratic Republic of the Congo. This Central African nation is the poorest country in the world, with a nominal GDP per person of just 500 US dollars. 71% of the country's population lives in absolute poverty, with no access to clean drinking water, education, medical attention, and even very scarce access to food. This is the highest rate of absolute poverty in the world.
Congo's impoverished state has been upheld by the unending war that has been caused by armed groups who have controlled many of the mines from which these minerals are extracted, thereby profiting from the extraction and illegal trade of these minerals.
It is the profits obtained from the illegal trade that has sustained this war. Yet, with the largest UN peacekeeping mission and foreign troops stationed in the region, the armed rebels have continued their plundering.
For more analysis, we contacted Alexander Powers, an African affairs analyst. Thanks, Mr. Powers, for your time. Our first question is, why has the international intervention failed to crash this war economy and stop this 20-year-old war?
Well, it's gone on longer than 20 years. They've had civil war and wars within that country for 40, 50 years. I mean, there are more people that have died in Congo than in most wars combined. Well, I shouldn't say all the wars, but so many people have died there. The issue is power and influence. It goes back to Mobutu when he was cut off from Europe. He said, you know, every man stand for himself. I think the Western policy has been to basically influence that region so that they can benefit from the wealth of Congo.
Alexander Powers, African affairs analyst.
The illegal trade involves different strategic activities, from smuggling gold to neighboring countries, all while operating outside legal channels, or corrupt government activities by top officials.
Why is there so much poverty where there is so much potential wealth? One answer came when Vocative was approached by a government tax inspector, willing to be interviewed at great personal risk. Vocative agreed to conceal his identity and alter his voice.
DRC cannot live without its mineral resources. In east of Congo, there is many mining companies, and all of those companies, they earn money, and people are still being poor.
Our source explained that when the mining companies receive a tax bill, they simply reach out to their contacts in the government, all the way up to cabinet-level positions in the Ministries of Finance and Mining.
In that time, the Minister of Finance arranged and called the tax administration and said to them, don't ask any money, you stop
According to our source, only 5% of taxes owed by mining companies are ever collected by the government.
Mr. Powers, knowing well that the smuggling and exploitation of gold is the main funder of the war, why has the international intervention not tackled this operation?
Well, I think the real underlying reason is people want the gold. I worked in the gold industry for 12 years, minerals in Africa. And people don't ask questions where the gold comes from. Now, the majority of this gold is artisan, meaning that it's dug up by hand. And the reason why that this gold is popular is because it's not easily obtained, meaning that big mining companies aren't particularly interested in these concessions, or if they're interested in these concessions, they may be indirectly or directly financing the insurrection for multiple reasons. Because during these wars, they need weapons, so they have to produce something of value. So that's what finances it, the gold. Then they'll take slaves, prisoners, use children to go out and dig. So the labor is extremely low, right? So they're not paying much for the gold.
Hata mara tano juu ukienda tu twala chakula kule ni sherti tu bakupita. Ukitika tu kwenda kule manake unajitolea tu basi.
Banakalia wale wenye wanawezaka kutumika oro. Sasa mimi mwenyewe sina wangu wa kutumika oro.
Yenye ilikuwa swali yetu sawa vile ba cruiser wenye tuko chini kwa makariere chini ya barabara. Ni selo ile yenye ulisema kusema kama ba cruiser bako deminize. Sababu banatumika na haba profite.
Just a month ago, a UN report on the Democratic Republic of Congo revealed a syndicate of illegal mining and how smuggled gold leaves the country to the UAE. It revealed that more than 1 ton of gold was smuggled out of the Ituri province alone in 2019. Yet officially, the country exported just over 73 kilograms of gold. The report found that Congo's neighbors export more gold than they produce. Example given, 95% of gold exports from Uganda were not of Ugandan origin. The report revealed that smuggled gold also made its way to Burundi, Rwanda, and Tanzania.
During the audit, we came across some severe findings, some disturbing findings. One of them is unreported cash transactions of over than 5.2 billion US dollars by one refiner in 1 year. You should avoid cash, especially if you're dealing with substance like gold. By its nature, everybody's asking for transparency and traceability. You want to hide, the easiest way to do it is use cash.
The information on the smuggling activities was not new, given an investigation by a group called The Century exposing how gold mined from eastern DR Congo reaches international markets, including the US and the UK.
The investigative report exposed a network working through the African Gold Refinery, AGR, in Uganda and controlled by a Belgian tycoon, Alain Goetz. The gold is exported to an affiliate refinery in the United Arab Emirates, which is later supplied to the US and the EU in big companies such as Amazon, General Electric and Sony, among others. In fact, the AGR and its affiliate refineries have been listed as suppliers to over 350 companies in the US and continue to operate despite UN sanctions.
The AGR has repeatedly denied being a source of the conflict gold despite facing indisputable accusations. Famous gold smugglers who have been named in several UN group of expert reports on Congo have been reported to supply the AGR with gold.
The African Gold Refinery has been under high scrutiny over its gold, yet it still supplies corporations in the US and the EU. Why haven't sanctions been implemented against it?
I'm not sure if, as someone who ran a gold refinery, it's pretty hard to source your gold, right? You don't know exactly how many hands it passed, where it came through. It doesn't have like any sort of trackable, element to it. It's gold, right? So the refinery is in a tough position. They probably know what they're getting, but they can't admit to it. The foreign governments can't really prove it, and or they want to keep the flow going because obviously gold is necessary part of economics, and Congo has a lot of it.
Foreign armies have been based in the Congo for peacekeeping missions for over 20 years, but they have failed to maintain peace, and the smuggling continues rising every year. The United Nations has provided the same information with no effective measures to stop this war economy. Since the peacekeeping missions have failed, could the withdrawal of all foreign intervention hold any hope for the Democratic Republic of the Congo?
I think that they were there as symbolic. They're not supposed to engage. They really can't do that much, but they're there physically, so they show some force. Congo's one of the worst ones. I mean, it's really back. It's really got a lot of problems, and unless the population unites, which is probably unlikely, I don't see anything in the short term where that country turns itself around. I mean, it should. It's like the wealthiest country. I mean, they have a waterfall that can power all of Africa with hydropower, but it's been like 10 years they can't make a decision, or there's a foreign influence affecting them. They could be very wealthy if they wanted to be.
And now my colleague is ready to present you with news and events from across Africa. What do you have for us today, Sheila?
Thank you, Henia. This week we look at government moves and conservation efforts across the continent. To start us off, Sudan's Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok is staying true to the transitional government goals. In solidarity with the pro-democracy movement, 18 civilian governors were appointed to replace military officials. 2 of the new governors were women. Now, to the World Health Organization warned on the COVID-19 threat to health workers. As cases continue to rise in the continent, more health workers' infections are being reported. The organization pointed out the need for African governments to ensure the protection of the frontline personnel. Now, still on governments, Sierra Leone approved the Independent Media Commission. The said law repeals the infamous Public Order Act that cracked down on critical journalism. The move fulfills the campaign promise by President Julius Bio to grant press freedom. Now, on to conservation news. Battery Life Solutions Limited Kenya announced plans to establish a battery recycling facility. The company wants to regenerate old batteries for sale as second-hand at half the price of new batteries. They plan to use the latest recycling technology to add new life to batteries. Now, still on conservation, Hanaiza Energy, a Ugandan company, is using organic waste to produce cooking gas. The clean gas is packaged in cylinders for sale to low-income households. The company promotes environmental conservation by reducing traditional forms of energy use that has caused large-scale deforestation and smoke-related diseases that has killed millions each year. Now, on to development. Loon and Telkom Kenya partnered to provide 35 high-altitude balloons that deliver internet services to Kenya. The move targets remote areas and is being tested for reliability and profitability. This marks the end of this part. Visit our social media pages for daily news updates. Stay tuned for more.
South Sudan, the plundering of the world's youngest nation.
The war in South Sudan has often been blamed on ethnic lines, but a recent investigation revealed the international actors playing the cards.
Now, these include the government itself, together with companies in the US, the UK, Asia, and elsewhere, offering direct support to the militias as they plunder and discover more of these new countries' natural resources.
Tens of thousands of innocent people killed, entire cities destroyed, nearly 2.5 million people driven from their homes. South Sudan, the world's newest nation, is being torn apart by a horrific civil war fueled by massive corruption.
For more on this topic, we contacted Mr. Edward Corrigan, an international human rights lawyer. Thanks a lot, Mr. Corrigan, for this interview. How have international players directly supported these deadly militias?
Sudan, first of all, is an unstable country from its onset. When the Europeans divided up Africa in 1885, they created countries that many of them had instability. So Sudan, the north part of Sudan is Arab and Muslim, and the south part of Sudan is African and non-Muslim. So that created a problem, which was exploited by various parties. So the United States, Britain, other countries, armed the militias. And when the Civil War broke out and ended in 2005, there has been an unstable government since then. And then there was a new civil war from 2011 on today, which they've gone through several peace agreements, and they have a new peace agreement. But the country is still, doesn't have a concept of civil society. There's no identity, and you've got various warlords fighting out with the government based in Juba, I think is the capital for southern Sudan.
Indeed, almost all atrocities in South Sudan has a link to an international corporation, a multinational bank, or a foreign government. Billions of dollars have been taken, money which would have otherwise been used to improve the livelihood of the people of South Sudan who have suffered major human rights abuses. Take, for example, the basic need of healthcare.
Without food, medicine, or electricity, South Sudan's largest hospital is clearly failing its patients.
You have enough funding here for you guys to get paid and everything? No?
You know how much I get a month? Less than $30.
Less than $30?
Yeah.
And you're the director of the hospital?
Yeah. Imagine the other doctors. They get like $10, $15.
Why?
Well, there's no money. The government has no money.
In 2016, a Chinese company working with Salva Kiir's 19-year-old daughter obtained lucrative mining permits in mineral-rich regions of South Sudan. Weeks after obtaining the permits, the government's military evacuated the area, violently driving thousands of people out from their land.
A company owned by President Kiir's 20-year-old daughter and her foreign business partners obtained a mining license in a territory in which the government's military, which are under the control of her father, President Kiir, later drove thousands of people from their homes.
How can these corrupt leaders and their international connections be brought to justice over the crimes they have been committing against the people of South Sudan?
Because the countries are so weak and so poor, corruption is like a way of life. All of the political leaders end up taking money for themselves and for their cronies and use foreign aid in a way that is not intended.
In 2015, two British businessmen, Abdul Karim Adam and Dawood Adam, formed an oil company with a top South Sudanese general who has been accused of forcibly recruiting child soldiers.
They also are major shareholders in South Sudan's National Credit Bank, a bank supported by the IMF. Today, such generals have acquired top government positions.
In 2018, an American arms dealer, Ara Dolarian, tried to sell over $43 million worth of weapons to the leader of an armed opposition group in South Sudan.
Dolarian's business venture was foiled when he was arrested by U.S. authorities in May 2019 and later convicted to the minimum sentence of 5 years in prison.
With the violators being holders of power, how will the corrupt leaders be held accountable?
You still have the Kiir, the dictator, one of the leading opponents of the government, had to run, was in Kenya and had to run for his life. The Americans actually enabled him to get out of Kenya, come to the United States for protection. But there was several other opposition figures who were assassinated by the South Sudan government in Kenya. So you still have, it's only been a week or so since the government has come to some sort of terms for the peace accord, and they've brought one member of the opposition into the government. So it's, I hope it's successful, but unfortunately, based upon past history, it's not, and outside parties will start to manipulate the events and probably try to exploit and start a civil war and, of course, exploit it by selling arms.
Just early this year, President Salva Kiir and opposition leader Riek Machar, currently the vice president of South Sudan, formalized a power-sharing agreement, marking an end to the 6-year conflict that has caused war in the youngest nation of the world.
And so began a new transitioning period for South Sudan, after more than 5 years of war.
I want to assure you, we will work collectively to end your long suffering.
With a power-sharing government in place, is there any hope for lasting peace in South Sudan?
It's a very difficult thing because they'll protect their own selves and they'll protect their cronies. And they may, there was actually 75 soldiers that were recently arrested by the government of Sudan for human rights abuses, torture, arbitrary detention, other, war crimes. Many of the soldiers pled guilty, but there's no idea of what the penalty is. The soldiers pleading guilty probably are assuming that they're going to be treated lightly by the government. So it may just be a show, but so far the government hasn't really enforced any laws with regard to violating of human rights or even war crimes.
Former warlords have been seen to try undo their crimes, acquiring governorship positions and working to return South Sudan to normal livelihood.
Close to 20,000 kids were forced to fight in South Sudan's 6-year civil war. Now that it's over, many of those kids have gone home, but thousands more children are still missing, and a centuries-old practice of selling them as brides or laborers continues to this day.
Well, it is, of course, become a business. If someone managed to get child from the neighboring community, he is going to take the child to the market. It becomes part of livelihood.
After long years of civil war, how can the government of South Sudan restore normalcy to the country?
Part of the problem is that they don't have a concept of a loyal opposition. So the people, it's like a take all, winner take all. Anybody who opposes them is the enemy. So you don't have a legal, loyal opposition that can, criticize the government and try to keep them honest and keep them, improve the country.
Thanks for staying with us. In this segment, we are going to look into our social media activities, what you, our viewers, had to say. We had at Katarina Tesfier stating, "It's only a bee. No one supports us when we are building this project. It's hard to understand the Egyptian people. They always need a fight. They don't like peace." We also had at Punya Purush stating, "Good job." We also had at Tendai Mbofana tagging us in his articles exposing the Zimbabwean government's latest crackdowns on the activists. We also had Lee Itleb stating, "Internet in Ethiopia was shut down for 23 days after the death of Achelu Handessa. The days were critical due to the Nile Dam negotiations, so the government had to exercise control." Now, many thanks to all our viewers, and a special thanks to Lee Itleb from Ethiopia and Mr. Mbofana from Zimbabwe, who have constantly updated us on the happenings in their countries. Keep the comments coming. Interact with us as we tell the African story. Thanks for staying tuned.
And we've come to the end of our show today.
We do hope that Africa's reputation of war and exploitation will one day come to a definite end.
Until next time, it's goodbye from me, Mubarak Kenya.
And me, Sheila Nelima, and the entire team.